Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze, gotta burn it down. Can't be afraid to leave this out. We got this far, don't know how.
If Yu-Gi-Oh! Were a cartoon series, I would be Bob the Builder because, quite frankly, I never forget my helmet. There are a lot of types of different decks in Yu-Gi-Oh!, but helmet decks have always been something that I've gravitated towards. Not because I have the IQ of a 3-year-old, but because I generally like the way that helmet decks play. Decks like True Dracos and Altergeists. Those are stunish decks that control the board through using cards in their archetypes and floodgates that aren't technically in their archetypes to win the game. The first sort of helmet trap deck that I began playing was actually Paleozoic Frogs, and many of you know that I took that deck to a regionals back in November before I got sick, but that was the first real sort of helmet deck that I ended up playing. I guess you could call ABCs a helmet deck, but considering they're more of a combo deck, especially now, I wouldn't really classify them as helmet because, especially with the Pendulum variant, you have to know how to operate the deck and maneuver through its hands to end up with a good combo and a good ending board. Paleo and True Draco, for example, however, kind of play themselves, and that's kind of what attracts me to them, is that I know what plays that I need to make in order to end on enough disruption that my opponent cannot play. But my question goes towards the people who really dislike the idea of playing floodgates or trap cards to disrupt the opponent because they feel like it's quote-unquote degenerate. While I find it really ironic that in a format with cards like Thunder Dragon Colossus, which prevents entire archetypes from playing the game, for example, just think about it this way. If you are a Sky Striker player and you are going a second against a Thunder Dragon board and you don't have a way to access Widowmaker because your engages are dead, how are you really playing out that game? And even more so for more rogue decks. For example, we just got Miscellaneousaurus put back to 3 on the most recent Forbidden Unlimited list. Given that dinosaurs rely so heavily on search cards, like Diagram, Terraforming, and Soul Eating Oviraptor, how are dinosaurs going to be able to OTK through a Thunder Dragon board if they don't have the double evolution pill already in hand? They need to be able to OTK through not being able to search, and oftentimes it's just way too much for these decks, like dinosaurs, to deal with, so they virtually can't do anything, and then they end up just losing the duel. Even more so, however, is the fact that decks like dinosaurs can still afford to run hand traps, but what about demise decks that can't afford to run hand traps? So not only do you have to know how to activate your cards and what to activate if you're playing a helmet deck, you also are going against a lot more oppressive boards going second with no hand traps in your deck, more than likely if you're playing a demise deck. Keep in mind though, I'm not saying that all demise decks are inherently helmet. However, most of the time, the decks that are demise decks tend to be more linear, more control-based. Those are the type of decks I'm talking about. My point here is that just because a deck plays trap cards that might not make the game very fun for you, that doesn't mean that that's the only type of deck that can shut you out, because combo decks do exist, and they can do the exact same thing, just without traps. The other thing that I wanted to touch on in this video is why I think helmet decks are actually healthy for the game. Keep in mind, the idea for any card game to flourish is that more players join and start playing the game than people quitting the game. We want to make it so that we have more growth than loss. We want to bring people into the game. A lot of new players become very intimidated when they see these big combo decks with like 10 card combos and really intricate steps. So having decks that are helmet, quote unquote, alleviates the pressure for people to immediately learn the hardest deck. It offers people who want to simply play the game and win an alternative to playing these combo decks with very complex win conditions. Decks like True Dracos and Altergeist provide these in spades, as the formula to success, so to speak, with these decks is simply setting a bunch of trap cards and either triggering Multifaker or summoning a Draco and flipping a bunch of floodgates and just winning the duel, which is considerably easier than memorizing a 4 to 5 step combo that ends on a board with a few negates that may or may not get sphere moded game 2 or 3. The final thing that I wanted to discuss as to why helmet decks, specifically decks that play floodgate cards, are actually really efficient for newer players to buy. And that reason is that because formats tend to stay relatively stable throughout formats, depending on how much product is released within a given format, you really won't have to change up your floodgates that you're maining all that often. But in the case that you do, you don't have to alter your deck build that much. You just simply change the floodgates that you're playing in your deck to counter the current metagame. So in the case that Rivalry of Warlords isn't that good in a given format, you can switch it up to something like There Can Be Only One, or Gozen Match. It's simply format dependent. I could keep going on and on about what I feel about helmet decks, but I think to sum up my entire point of this video, I think that helmet decks do not deserve the hate that they get. Honestly, helmet decks are some of the most efficient decks for newer players to play because it teaches them the fundamental basics of the game, and they can rack up a lot of wins, which just further encourages newer players to get involved with the card game. So I think that overall, these cards and decks are really efficient at what they do. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. It's at DMD, and your boy is out.
Just like the street lights lit this town, like a fire in a blaze.